AutoLine on the Road at CAR's MBS virtual event is brought to you by Mitsubishi Electric, Innovation Electrified, with special thanks to the Center for Automotive Research.
Thanks for joining us on AutoLine's coverage of the management briefing seminars for 2020, which have gone virtual because of the COVID pandemic, but it's still going on. And joining us right now to talk about the session that she just chaired, we've got Kristin Dziczek from the Center for Automotive Research. Hello out there, Kristin.
Hi, John. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you. Say, I know that your session was all about trade this morning. What were some of the highlights that were discussed? And maybe we should talk first about who you had in your session.
Sure. I had Jennifer Safavian. She's the head of Autos Drive America. That's the trade association for the international automakers in the U.S. I had Nicole Bivens-Collinson. She's with Sander, Travis, and Rosenberg, a trade consultancy. And I had Jenny Leonard from Bloomberg News. She's a trade reporter on Bloomberg News. And I think Jenny's big point was, there didn't used to be a hot beat on trade. And for the last 4 years, it certainly has been. And for the foreseeable future, we expect trade to continue to be a hot beat in this industry.
Yeah, no question about it. There's so much focus on it now, more than there ever has been before. So what were you talking about? U.S., China, the USMCA, all of that, or what?
Well, we touched on just about everything, but we spent a lot of time on USMCA. As you know, that entered into force July 1st. There's still a lot of confusion about how exactly to comply. And one of the big things is that automakers themselves have to comply with a number of rules, but they may be asking their suppliers for data and inputs in order to support their compliance. And so there's, if you're a supplier, you're probably getting a lot of different requests from a lot of different customers in a bunch of different forms that you haven't seen before, but all of that is helping your customer comply with the labor value rule, with the rule, the regional value rule, the steel aluminum content rules, all the various and sundry different portions of this very complicated agreement.
Boy, complicated is the word there. I mean, if companies are spending so much time just trying to make sure that they're compliant, how do they take advantage of a trade agreement like this? Well,
the USITC, when it evaluated the USMCA, said, the gains to the U.S. were very small and marginal, and largely because we were going from a state of free trade among the three partner countries to a state of free trade with more restrictions among the three partner countries. There certainly are some opportunities in that space, though, especially in electric vehicle components and automated vehicle components. These were not part of NAFTA. NAFTA hadn't been updated in some time, so the newer content was not part of the deal. But almost all content on the vehicle is now part of the trade agreement. So, one of the big points was that if you're in an automaker, regardless of what your job is, if your job isn't trade compliance, trade may become part of your job. If you're in supply chain or supply chain management or even product design, which suppliers you're working with and where those parts come from are going to matter a whole lot more now that USMCA is in place.
Mm-hmm. What were some of the other major points that you think came out of your session?
Well, we talked a bit about China. The U.S. currently has open trade negotiations with China, Japan, EU, UK, even Kenya. There's a lot of open fronts, but China is one of the most impactful. So we did talk a bit about that, and the big takeaway there was that we don't expect to see much change in U.S.-China ratcheting up of tensions, and it's gotten even more tense recently with closure of the consulate in Houston. There's been a Chinese supplier that's been put on a list that you have to completely disassociate your supply chain from that company by the end of September. There's just going to be continued unrest in the U.S.-China relationship. Even if there's a change in the White House in November, we expect that a Democratic administration would continue to keep a focus on China.
Why did you decide, or what was the conclusion that even with the Democrat in the White House, this is not going to change vis-a-vis China?
Well, if you go back to the previous Democratic administration, the Obama administration's major showcase of trade was the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and that was put together to link a multilateral community of nations to counter China's threat on the global stage. And so that that continuation of focus on China as a formidable opponent in trade and economically will continue. Now, I don't know if you can see a Democratic administration rejoining TPP, now called the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership, but we do expect a Democratic administration to go back to more multilateral deals, and maybe not right off the bat. I think that was another takeaway, was that a Democratic administration may focus more on domestic issues to start with, and trade may not come, any kind of trade change may not come until later on in the administration.
Look, I know that MBS is totally different, not going up north and everybody being in conference rooms and the like. Sounds like you had a pretty good discussion about trade, though.
We did. One of the great things about going virtual is that we're able to reach a much wider audience, and we're able to bring in speakers that we might not necessarily have been able to bring all the way up to Traverse City. So everyone on my panel today is based in Washington, D.C., although one of them was dialing in from Idaho. We were right in the middle of her vacation. And so, if it was in the middle of the vacation, I don't think I would have gotten Jennifer Safavian to, take a little break out to fly up to Traverse City for an hour presentation. So it did work out really well that we were able to join people from across the country and across the world to have this discussion.
Yeah, in fact, I listened in on the one on sustainability. It was very interesting. There was Dane Parker from General Motors, who runs their efforts there, and Gulai, and I'm going to butcher her last name, Sarhakatakulu, anyway, from BASF. And it was very interesting. One of the things that they were talking about is they see ETF funds, electronically traded funds, which is an investment tool that you can use, really starting to get into sustainability. In fact, I think it was Gulai that made a really interesting point that sustainable brands are outperforming regular brands at a number of companies right now. So there was a pretty good discussion there on sustainability, and I kind of like how this is all going.
Right. Well, and I think, sustainability pertains to trade as well. I know the current administration's goal in all of their trade negotiations is trying to bring manufacturing back to North America, and particularly to the United States. But shorter supply chains do have less of a carbon impact. So, you can put those things together as well.
I'm glad you made that connection. I hadn't thought of that. Sustainability can definitely have a big impact on trade.
Yes.
Kristin, thanks so much for your time this morning and giving us a quick update of what your session was all about.
You're very welcome, Sean. It's nice to see you.
Okay, bye-bye for now.
Our scene-aware interaction technology is capable of adjusting its output based on a spoken response from the driver. For instance, if the driver indicates that they cannot see the given landmark, the system will quickly identify alternate landmarks or improve the guidance sentence to provide a more detailed description.
Follow the silver car to turn left.
I can't see it.
Okay, follow the silver car in the leftmost lane.
Thanks for joining us on our continuing coverage of the 2020 Management Briefing Seminars put on by the Center for Automotive Research. Joining me right now is Brett Smith from CAR, talking about his session at this year's Management Briefing Seminars. And Brett, you had a session today all about electric vehicles, electrification. Tell us, what were some of the highlights?
John, I did. And it was a fascinating discussion. I had Dustin Krause, from Volkswagen, and Jörg Trumpler from ZF. And we spent a lot of time talking about, are we there yet? Is electrification really happening? And I think, John, the thing that I come away from that discussion is the car industry thinks it's happening. They really have committed to this pathway.
So we're not just going to see compliance cars. Now you're talking about getting into, like Tesla has done, things that make people's hearts go pitter-pat and want to go out and buy them.
Well, that's the next step. So I think Dustin and Jorg and I talked about the industry being ready to do this, is committing to it. Now our challenge, or our question is, will the U.S. customers make that next step, which is a big leap of faith. We have car companies and suppliers following them that are making massive investments. And really, truly, I think when you look at these companies, the fundamentals that they're talking about, they're changing. But the market hasn't yet changed. And for us, from a research point, or you from a media point, that's a fascinating next step. And I think this opportunity to watch this industry through this transition, whether it's 5 years or 15 years or longer, we don't know yet. But I can certainly see, as we talk to Dustin and to Jorg and even others, that this industry has made that commitment.
Yeah. Did you talk about different global differences? Because we know electric car sales are down by a lot in China. In the US, they're sort of holding their own, but looks like in Europe is where they're really starting to catch on.
We didn't get into a lot of the international stuff, which is kind of interesting because we had 2 German companies representatives talking about the North American market. But yes, there's some of that discussion of this is a different market than China. It's a different market than Europe. And as you point out, European market right now is going battery electric crazy. And it's really an interesting political, socioeconomic discussion. And it does not necessarily apply to the US.
What were some of the other highlights that came out of your discussion, Brad?
I think both of them in their opening comments talked about their commitment to racing of electric vehicles, and that pushing it now from the internal combustion engine as a racing vehicle to now this world of battery electric vehicles, being that test ground, being that place where both ZF and Volkswagen are trying to push the limit, both in terms of technology, John, but also in terms of marketing to show that this is real hardware. It is real durable stuff.
You know, that's very interesting that you're saying it. I assume they're talking about Formula E, which has attracted so much OEM interest.
ZF is talking Formula E, and Volkswagen Group was not Formula E. I'm sorry, Volkswagen of North America is not Formula E. They've got some other things they're working on, but yes, Audi and Porsche both have Formula E work. That really is trying to understand how this technology works in the real racing world. And as you and I know, that racing world is so often a proving ground for technology.
Yeah, what I love about it is, you know, typically there's races every week or every other week, and your car's got to be ready. There's no going to the boss and saying, hey, we have to delay this program a bit. You better have the car on the grid.
Our buddy John Warniak loves the saying, you know, the race starts at noon with or without you. And with product development, with engineering, that's the case. And yeah, so, but also the drive cycle of a race car is so tough. You learn so much. And so both those speakers talked about that how they're using that to leverage that learning. And yeah, obviously some of the visibility as well.
You know, because I knew I'd be able to talk to you about your session, I was watching one of the others, the State of Manufacturing that Nigel Francis led. Mm-hmm. Very interesting discussion, too, about how we need more new technology on the shop floor. You know, they talked about a new cell phone comes out every 6 months, and they're working in so many cases in manufacturing with 30-year-old technology. But one of the reasons why I'm bringing this up is they felt that electrification is going to really bringing in a lot of new technology in the manufacturing area. I don't know if you got into any of that in your session.
Yeah, we did not, but it's a really important discussion, I think, from the manufacturing shop floor, as well as the national competitiveness. The United States is not a leader in electrification at this point. That is being developed elsewhere. That's being pushed elsewhere. Do North American-based companies lose out in some role in terms of that technology? But then also, John, as you talk about the transition of building those things in their home, in their plants, in their markets, learning those skills and becoming very good at them. Because if what I heard today is true, this industry is absolutely transitioning and planning for that transition, and it's going to take a lot of work at the local level, at that plant level, to understand how that change happens.
Yeah, interesting what you're saying. The U.S. does not lead in electrification, certainly not from building battery cells and electric motors and things like that. But most of that stuff, or a lot of it, was invented or developed here. I don't know if you talked about any of that, how the U.S. is a leader in development, but doesn't seem to commercialize it.
No, it's part of that overall understanding of where the companies are located, how they're moving. One of the questions was, how do you communicate back to your home office this difference in perspectives, this difference in cultures of the customer? And that challenge for every company that operates in this country and elsewhere is you have different markets, you have different customers, you have different expectations. How do you balance that out? And I think that as we look forward to our session tomorrow on kind of how the supply base is preparing for this transition is a really important part of that discussion as we start to take it from, okay, if the industry has in fact committed to this, what does that mean for a supply base that right now is 99% internal combustion engine and knows that they're not going to make a profit on electrification technologies for a long time, but they've got to be prepared. And so how do you make that transition? So I think today steps beautifully into tomorrow. As we talk today about it's happening, tomorrow it's how the heck do we figure this out as a supply base?
Yeah, Brett, we're just hitting the highlights here. If somebody wants to go back and watch your entire session, because it sounds like there was a lot more detail, they can just go to the CAR website and register and be able to watch that then.
Absolutely, it should be available for the next several weeks, and it's a good 50 minutes spent, I believe.
Cool,
really
great.
Two good speakers, really interesting topic, and they're good speakers, John, but they're also very knowledgeable and very passionate about what they're doing. One, Jörg, a classic German engineer. The other, Dustin, a classic technology guy who loves electric vehicles. It was a really good interaction of two really bright guys.
Real good. Well, I look forward to tomorrow's update as well. Thanks so much for your time, Brett.
John, appreciate it. Take care of yourself.